Story 1. After 15 years, they hired an incompetent person to run the information technology department. He had no idea what we did or how information technology really worked. I told them we needed more people. I could not do it all and had to focus on cybersecurity. They said they would hire someone, but months later they said they would not and that I would have to do more for the same pay. I left. 6 months later, they were hit with ransomware. Story 2. Once I worked at Domino's and the owner would check the cameras constantly, call the store, and tell me how to run my shift. It was not a huge deal. Micromanagement is common in fast food, but that day I was the only manager on duty. There was a cook, 2 drivers, and the phone operator. I had to expedite. Take finished pizzas out of the oven, check them for quality, box and cut them, and assign routes to the drivers. Someone yelled at the phone operator over something that was not her fault. She was about 16 and it was her first experience with workplace hostility, so she started crying. I told her to borrow a cigarette from one of the drivers and go outside to pretend to smoke for 10 minutes so she could calm down. The owner did not usually complain about smoke breaks. The owner called, interrupting my call with a customer, and told me to send her home. I explained she only needed a minute and that I had to keep expediting because the cook did not have the time and I could not trust the drivers to handle it. He said that if I was doing fine without her for 10 minutes during the rush, I should not be wasting his money keeping her for a whole shift. I said I would free up an opening so he could hire someone he trusted to make those decisions, and I walked out in the middle of my shift. Story 3. My manager continually declined my vacation requests. After I quit, she even had the nerve to ask if I could work through the summer to cover other employees' vacations. Story 4. If I did not leave that job, my wife would have divorced me. Story 5. When the Sunday night dread started hitting me on Friday afternoon, I knew it was time to go. Story 6. I realized I was spending more time stressing about work than actually living my life. Story 7. I was an English teacher in China. I had a group of adult students who wanted to improve their English because they worked in international companies. We got along very well, and after class one evening, we all decided to go out for dinner and drinks. I received an angry call from the owner accusing me of trying to steal her students and teach them privately. The restaurant was very close to the school, and it had not closed for the evening because night classes ran until 9 o'clock. So I walked back, called the owner an idiot, and quit. Then I went back to the restaurant and got drunk with my former students. Back then, it was extremely easy to secure English teaching jobs, and I had a new one within a week. Screw you, the language school. Story 8. They put me on the manager's course, said I wasn't quite up to par, then spent over a year not training me to improve. Every time I asked, they said, "We'll talk about it later," but later never came. Eventually, I decided that if they were not going to bother, neither was I, and I left the job. Story 9. Separate places. 1. Why would we want to make it easier for our clients to access the data that they pay very high prices for? 2. An employer took 2 weeks, dragging their feet about a promotion that was mostly a title change with a 10 to 15% raise, while another company offered a raise of more than 35% if I could start within 2 weeks after a 20-minute conversation. Story 10. I do not want a dead-end promotion or to be stuck at the same level for years. Story 11. The owner sold the contract to another person. The new owner does not want to keep the benefits or the 401k retirement plan. Story 12. New hires with no experience are being paid more than experienced employees. Story 13. The salary is low and the colleagues, the environment, and the work are toxic. Every day feels miserable and I have no motivation to go to work. Story 14. Not paid for the first 20 minutes of my workday. Only getting 1/3 of my paycheck. Extremely bored and unchallenged. Realizing the workload wasn't worth what I was being paid. My boss punched me in the mouth after I told him to fuck off when he was abusive toward me. I walked away from a landscaping client because they were upset that my crew and I stopped for lunch. Story 15. I was expected to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I worked at a tennis club that was open from 7 in the morning to 10 in the evening. I would get calls at 3 in the morning from the owner about non-emergency matters because he was working and expected me to be available. At a yearly review, I was asked directly about my health and what I was doing to get healthier, even though I was not an athlete and my role managing billing and the front desk did not require athletic performance. I poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into a toxic workplace that involved frequent yelling. Story 16. People left or were let go, so I ended up doing more of the leftover work because I was considered reliable, but my paycheck did not increase. I learned that being efficient often leads to more work, and I will not let myself be taken advantage of again. Story 17. My manager set me up to fail. I had evidence and confirmation of this behavior from a former colleague, only to have human resources tell me that it did not matter because they were the manager and I was just an employee. It was not until I quit that a few colleagues contacted me personally to confirm they were facing the same problems. None of them would speak up when interviewed by human resources out of fear for their jobs. Story 18. I was promised a promotion. Over the next 3 years, they kept delaying it. First, I was told I did not look the part and had to wear a tie in the warehouse. Then they postponed it for another year. Then they said I needed to work on the annual catalog. By the 5th year, I was fed up with the dangling carrot. I gave my 2 weeks notice after I got a higher paying job. They told me I was making a huge mistake and that if I stayed 1 more year, I would be up for the promotion. Story 19. 2 different jobs. 1. All the directors were hammered most days after boozy lunches. Secretaries covered for them. It was a super cool location in Soho, central London, and 10 minutes on the tube from home. 6 stops for me. I used to cry in the loose. I was also working with very well-known, prestigious clients. Horrible. When I got a new job in a different industry, my life changed massively. 2. I went from 2 toxic managers in one job to 2 even worse managers. Sadly, all 4 were women. If I had not needed the money, I would have told them to shove it, which I eventually did after appalling treatment. The relief I felt despite having nothing to go to was immense. Story 20. My boss knew I wanted a management position. I got extra certifications and took other steps to broaden my knowledge and make myself more useful to the company. Instead, he said I did not have enough experience, even though there were promises of potential advancement and despite my years with the company, and he hired a friend with no experience to fill the position. He then moved me to a different department, brought in someone he likely wanted a personal relationship with, and tried to reduce my pay, even though he knew I had fought for a raise and needed to earn a certain amount to stay. I became self-employed, and while it has its own stresses, I now earn much more than I did there and have a better schedule. Story 21. Short version. A supervisor told me, a restaurant general manager, to apologize to a restaurant guest who came in without a mask during the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic and yelled that I had assaulted him and was calling the police when I refused him access to my server station and the kitchen line where other guests' plates were coming out. I am a small woman. I did not touch the man and I did not apologize. I told him I was sorry he was upset about being denied the access he wanted. Access he would not have had even on a good day. After the guest left, the supervisor told me I should think about how I could have handled it better. After 12 years of loyal service, I gave the company my notice. Disgusting. Story 22. I was a manager for a physically demanding job where the people I managed often called off. One time 3 employees called off in a single day. I worked very hard covering for them on a very hot day. I was disrespected by the senior manager, so I did not show up the next day. Story 23. I teach middle school and am about to resign. I do not think I need to explain. Story 24. The general manager and a person acting as manager became upset when I could not perform the job one day because of extreme hip pain from hip dysplasia. I did not return after that. Story 25. When the boss was around, everything was fine. It was a good, easy job. The minute he left for his 3 weeks in Spain, I would get a call from the accountant saying the boss wanted me to work 8-hour days, even though the boss had said the day before that as long as I was working. And not standing around, I could work as long as I wanted. After a few months of this, I had enough. I took a week off to go job hunting. I had an interview on Monday and a new job by Tuesday. I handed in my notice on the Friday of my holiday, worked my final week, and never looked back. Story 26. My general manager left, and they were going to promote a lazy, chain-smoking Bible thumper, so I found another job. 5 months later, I was demoted, and my pay and hours were drastically reduced. I took a position with a different franchise of the same company. Last week, my former general manager returned. She is now a shift lead for the company I currently work for. We are both just as miserable as before. Story 27. I had a great job helping a small company grow from 6 to 40 employees in a few years. The owner was horrible, but I needed the job at the time. At one point, she owed me $35,000 in back payroll. Then she attempted to overstate her expenses and lied to the auditors about it and was debarred from working with the state. I still had 2 open projects I could have worked on for 2 more years, but I refused to continue. She could have asked for help, but she waited until the letter arrived to tell me the bad news she had known about for about 6 months. Story 28. I didn't answer my phone while I was on vacation. I called them back a few hours later and was accused of not being a team player because they said they needed me. Did I mention I was on vacation? I started job hunting as soon as I returned and left a couple of months later. It's been about 8 years and they still call a couple times a year, asking me to call back because they say they need me. I thought it was ridiculous. Story 29. I was hired at a small company. Things went well for a few years until my manager retired. They hired a new manager with no experience in our industry to replace him. I quickly noticed he was rude, aggressive, sexist, and racist. I tolerated his behavior for a few months, but when I reached my limit, I contacted Human Resources. Human Resources said they had received a few complaints but did not want to fire him because it had taken 6 months to find him. Shortly after, I left. A couple of months later, I learned they fired him for being rude to a customer and for telling sexist jokes to a vice president. It was surprising that they knew about his behavior and kept him employed until he offended a vice president. Story 30. My father died suddenly, and I was only allowed 3 days funeral leave. I called my boss and told him I would be gone for a week. He fired me when I returned, which was fine because I had planned to quit. I hated that job because of the lousy manager. Story 31. I worked a ton of overtime, and the team was staffed at about half the needed level for the number of people we supported. Priorities changed daily and leadership turnover was high. A company survey found our department had the worst work-life balance in the organization. The response was to give us another project to fix the imbalance without spending money. Hiring more staff was not an option. The last straw was my sister's passing, which prompted a wake-up call. Why was I working so hard for an executive group that could not pick me out of a lineup? I decided I was done. Story 32. I was lied to about what my duties would be, and that would have stunted my career growth. We agreed on salary and I gave notice. The offer letter was for less and they did not honor other promises. I was gone in 3 months when I found a much better job. I did give them 1 week's notice. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from a recruiter who said they had a very urgent need for my specialty and asked if I could start that day. I laughed when they told me who it was for. The same recruiter called me again 2 weeks later. I wished them hell. Story 33. I made peace with the fact that they did not care about me or the work I put in. When I originally got the job, it was my dream job. I was a coach in a nationally recognized facility, coaching alongside my literal idols. In spite of the bumps in the road, I am still happy I had the experience, but I outgrew it. I was a young professional when I started, and over a decade I reached a level where I no longer needed them, but they did not get the memo. I started lightly by no-showing for shifts I had said I was not going to do, forcing them to assign the work to more junior staff. I was simply too busy for it, and they backed off. Eventually, they tried to hold my job over my head and insisted I had to do the work, so I stopped showing up. No call, no show ever again. I moved myself and all my loyal clients to a different location that had far fewer rules and restrictions and none of the busy work. It required almost no effort on my part, and I was better off without them. The opportunities they were blocking were available everywhere else. I walked into other facilities being offered jobs and had the position to turn them down. It never mattered that I was exceptionally good at the job, that my client retention was the best among their staff, that my clients were loyal, or that I caused no problems and could work with everyone. If I could not be controlled into doing busy work, I was worthless to them, so I acted accordingly. Ultimately, it was a management issue. The old manager, who became the general manager and had hired me, liked me and never put me in that kind of situation. The new manager, who came on board years after me, was notorious for playing favorites with friends and family, and I did not have to put up with that. It was a toxic situation, and I still laugh a little at the chaos I hope I caused for a day. These days, I run my business solo and freelance, contracting myself out to programs and working with individuals only. It has been the best decision I have ever made. I cannot ignore that spending 10 years where I did set the table for this. There is no way I would have had the confidence or skill to do this without those years in the pressure cooker. I still value what I did and learned, and I also value defiantly telling them that they needed me more than I needed them. Story 34. What I was told. Your hours would be Monday to Friday, 7 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, or to 5:30 in the afternoon if it was particularly busy. What I got? A 0 hours contract, where my entire tenure consisted of 5 12-hour shifts across 2 weeks, followed by 4 weeks of nothing. Story 35. I was cornered and threatened in an empty office. I worked overnight, and no one else except our team was in the building. I wasn't afraid of them, but I certainly wasn't going to tolerate that abuse. Story 36. One of the many reasons was when I tried to return to work after a severe breakdown. A bit of backstory. This woman had the same role as everyone else, but had inserted herself into management to make it look like she held a managerial position. During my return to work meeting to see if they could offer support, she said that I would not need occupational health because that was just for people with physical problems like her bad knees and that mine was just mental. She then added that she had never filled those forms out and did not know how to do them, and she laughed. I walked away. Story 37. I have quit 4 jobs so far, all prematurely compared with what I had hoped for. Each was caused by a combination of disrespect from management and hierarchy, toxic coworkers, exploitative policies, and illegal or immoral acts I witnessed from the very people who should have prevented them. My current job involves 3 of those issues, excluding illegal or immoral acts. The world of work is a cesspool. It feels like trying to swim in a frozen pond in Siberia while being cryogenically frozen. Story 38. There were many reasons I left, but the tipping point was when a manager started yelling in my face about things I did not do. I said okay, went to the back to text a friend and former coworker, and began lining up my current job that night. I had tolerated more than I should have and was not paid enough to deal with that. Story 39. I had problems at the job for about 6 months. The breaking point was being reprimanded for refusing a copier delivery on a day I had paid time off. They would not accept that I was not there. When I refused to sign the write-up, I gave 2-week notice. Story 40. I am kinda stuck in between. I did a post on this that got some good insights. I am planning on quitting in a month or so. I work in the founder's office. I joined as an intern 2 years ago. The founders took the whole office offline, allowing remote workers to work from home. Those who were hired remotely during the startup's early days have now been left out to dry, which is extremely unfair. There is no real acknowledgement of their work, and most of them have already quit. The people I started with are no longer on the team, and it really sucks to be isolated. The founders have started ignoring me, saying there are too many clients and they do not have time to review my work. I feel this is not working out well for me because I do not know whether I am doing things right or wrong. We can close clients with my proposals. I handle distribution, but that is the only thing I have been doing for the past 2 years. Nothing has improved. I feel the word growth is overused, but I have to use it here. I feel extremely stagnant both financially and in terms of skills. The rest of the team who came after me have grown twofold both financially and professionally, which hurts a lot. So yes, I will be quitting in a month because I need some time to figure out what I am going to do next. Context. Writing this as an engineering graduate from a Tier 1 university in India with an 8.5 grade point average who thought the founder's office role would take me to new heights. Maybe I got it all wrong. Story 41. A return to office mandate. Badge-based entry and exit tracking for salaried employees. Further reductions to the already poor medical coverage. The only good manager announced their retirement. Story 42. Working as a financial advisor caused me depression, and I was terrible at it. I'm sociable, but not very sales-oriented. I hate commission-based salaries with a very low base pay. Story 43. Doctors determined I needed a heart transplant. I worked during the 1.5 years it took to complete all the tests and was placed on the transplant waiting list. As my condition worsened, I had to go on disability. Story 44. I have a mental health diagnosis. Working during hypomania became very harmful and stressful for my employers and me. I had to leave. Story 45. We really appreciate your hard work, so we will provide you with extra lip service. Story 46. Massive cultural change and increased workload, plus a looming return to the office. Story 47. Toxic work environment. The day I took over 10 minutes to breathe in and out just to calm myself before a meeting was the day I told myself it was time to leave. Story 48. After many good years, they stopped caring about their employees. Story 49. Military culture includes constant blue falcons and blatant backstabbing. It is almost encouraged so the strongest rise to the highest positions. The level of bureaucracy in the military is unimaginable to the average civilian. Story 50. The chief executive officer is trying to involve himself in my personal relationship. Story 51. I found out I had been getting ripped off on my commissions for 7 years. Story 52. Poor management and unethical business decisions in some cases. Boredom in others. Story 53. I missed my dog. 10 hours every day was too long to be away from her. Story 54. I was on a 14-hour conference call from home when my vice president decided, without evidence, that I was ignoring a hardware issue. There were no hardware problems. It was only a software issue. 2 weeks later, I retired. Story 55. After 10 years at the same company, it was mostly my colleagues who pushed me to find a new job. Story 56. I chose health and happiness over a higher paycheck. My stress carried home and harmed my relationship with my partner and our pets. Sometimes I miss the financial comfort, but I do not think I would have a girlfriend now if I had stayed. She is more important than money. Story 57. I found a new job that seems like a great opportunity and pays more. Story 58. My boss threw a phone at me because I was in the middle of doing work for the entire office as the office manager. Not for him. He was abusive but brought the company a lot of money, so they let him get away with it. Story 59. Being asked to put more energy into hiding problems than it would have taken to solve them. Story 60. My shoulder joint collapsed and I could no longer do the job. It took several months before I could even function without pain. Story 61. I used to be a comedian, typically on Reddit, social media, and various platforms, but I take my career seriously. I was a night custodian, locked in a school with 3 or 4 others all night. We had the time of our lives, laughing and sharing. I said something to someone who felt ashamed of being a custodian, and they considered my comedy harassment. I lost 2 jobs that day, or 3 if you count the time someone asked me for a joke. Story 62. A 5th departmental restructure in 8 years, and they were getting it badly wrong again. It came with a useless, toxic, lazy bully of a boss who was new to the business. After 15 years there, I was finally done with them. I should have left 10 years earlier. Story 63. My boss yelled at me because a customer asked me to tell the owners that a family member had died, but I was in the middle of a rush and forgot. Story 64. The manager was awful during my last year. The company did not give us enough hours to run the store. I got sick of being treated poorly. I would not go back to Quick Trip for less than $35 per hour, no weekends, and only part-time. Story 65. The only reasons I ever quit were the manager. She was unpleasant. It was my first job and everyone disliked her. I also left because I could get better pay elsewhere. Story 66. It was a small mom-and-pop travel agency. My desk was in a tiny back room facing the bathroom, where the boss would disappear for long sit-downs. The sounds and the odor coming from there became too much and I finally left. Story 67. Fear of repercussions and reacting from emotional instability. Worst life decision ever? Story 68. I was late to the party. We needed 4 cans of special paint, about $75 a can, for a $350,000 job. My old boss pitched a fit because I was not with him when he saw the paint request, but my buddy was, and I found out 5 minutes later. I had been on the verge of leaving so many times. I ended up with $12 more per hour and a lead position. I could choose any company truck I wanted. The truck was valued at $100,000. A year later, I got $2 more per hour and became a field supervisor. It is a lot of work, but I am much happier. Story 69. The school where I worked was responsible for a little boy being punished to death by his parents. They kept writing him up, suspending him, and making sure his mother or stepfather had to leave work, causing lost wages, to deal with him. They punished him and his brother with beatings, burnings, and other abuse. The boy's brother barely survived, and the boy was brought to the emergency room dead by his mother. The school knew what they were doing. They pushed instead of addressing the boy's behavior at school and finding remedies. May he rest in peace. May his brother find relief from the anguish he has endured, and may the people at the school who were responsible for pushing so hard rot in hell. The parents are currently facing the death penalty. Story 70. A manager with major insecurities saw others' successes as threats and continually micromanaged and nitpicked to feel important. There was no hope for a genuine team environment. Story 71. I, a 23-year-old male, am going to quit my government job that pays well because I believe it is not the best fit for this period of my life. It is a great job and I cannot complain, but the federal government is overly bureaucratic and I do not learn much. I am an ambitious young man with a home services business through which I can earn a decent income right now. I believe I need to take risks, travel, enjoy life, and prioritize what I want next. I may be going through a young adult crisis, but I have worked very hard for the past few years and still live in the same small town I have lived in my entire life. I want to make something more of myself and be my own boss. Story 72. I overheard a meeting between the 3 owners in which one of them was making things up about me, criticizing my work, and discussing who would replace me after they fired me. Ironically, I found a new job with significantly higher pay before they found a replacement. Story 73. I used to work as a barista for a large coffee chain. The bullying culture among management was horrendous. A new manager was assigned to our store. He acted like a company yes-man, the kind who would throw anyone under the bus to advance his own agenda. 2 experiences in 1 week made me quit. First, it was December and freezing outside. A homeless person stayed outside our store all day, and at closing time I gave him a hot drink and a sandwich from the store, which I paid for. The next day the manager pulled me in, showed me the closed-circuit television footage of me doing that, and told me not to do it again, even though there was no loss to the company. A few days later, a rude customer swore at me. I refused to serve him, which was my right. The manager pulled me into the office and told me I had to serve him or receive a warning. I told the manager to go to hell and walked out. It was the worst job I ever had. Story 74. Poor leadership made me look for a new job. A job offer prompted me to resign. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.